Hello, I'm going to talk about a few things in this video that you may or may not know about Beast Mastery Hunter. To start, I'm going to talk about the talents that you will more than likely want to take. Going to start by taking Crouching Tiger, Hidden Chimera. You can take Post Haste if you really think you need the move speed. Overall, this is more beneficial though. Usually people will go with Binding Shot. You could go with Intimidation or Flavor Instinct if you really wanted to, because this talent is not that important. You will not get very much use out of it during the raids. Iron Hawk is the go-to. Spirit Bond just doesn't really heal you enough and isn't effective enough to warrant taking. You usually will use Steady Focus. There's very select times where you can use Dire Beast. In Blackrock Foundry specifically, you can use it on Gruul or Blackhand. Generally, the rule of thumb is that you can use it on pure single target fights. Otherwise, any fight that you will essentially beast cleave is where you want to use Steady Focus, as it increases not just your focus regen but also your pets, which is very important. The next tier you pretty much will always take Stampede. The other ones just can't compete ever since they made it a 40-second effect. The damage is just too strong, even if you only get one Stampede during a fight. Barrage will pretty much always pull through above the other ones, especially since you can use it during your Bestial Wrath for reduced cost and increased damage. And adaptation is significantly better than the other two for Beast Mastery. I'm going to talk about Glyphs for a moment. Spirit Animal Bond is basically what you will use just because there's no real glyph that'll increase a hunter's damage, so there's nothing that's essential. It's more all about utility. Animal Bond just increases the healing you and your pet receive, and that just helps keep you alive. A lot of people like to run the Glyph of Disengage. More distance is just nicer, it's more convenient. Ever since they made Tranquilizing Shot a 50 focus cost, it's pretty much been essential to run the Glyph if you're ever going to need to dispel. There are a few fights that it's very helpful for you to dispel, in Blackrock Foundry specifically. So using this Glyph is pretty important because you do not want to spend 50 of your focus just to dispel something. That being said, with the 10-second cooldown, you'll have to coordinate with your raid to get other dispels since you will sometimes not be able to get all of them. Another option would be Glyph of Deterrence, decrease the amount of damage you take even further from 30% to 50%. Really, you would only take this if you think you'll need it. It's not an all the time Glyph. Glyph of Aspect of the Cheetah is very beneficial because you can use Aspect of the Cheetah at any time during a fight. If you need some movement speed, you can put it on before a fight and you can forget about it at that point, really. And this just helps because you can get some extra move speed without having to worry about getting dazed. I like to use Glyph of Lesser Proportion because when there are so many hunters in a raid and so many pets, they can sometimes really aid the melee DPS in your group, and I just wanted to be a good guy. So first, I'm going to talk about Steady Focus, the talent we mentioned earlier. What this does is when you do 2 Cobra shots together, you will gain the buff Steady Focus. And what this does is just increase your focus regen. But just because you gain this buff every time you cast 2 together doesn't mean you always want to cast 2 together. It's not as important to always cast 2, and the only time you really need to is just to maintain the buff and keep it up. That doesn't mean, though, that if you have the buff, don't cast 2, just don't prioritize it unless it's to keep the buff. This is also important to note that you definitely want to cast 2 of these before going to Bestial Wrath because they actually will be the same exact 10-second effect, and if you get them at the right time, which is not hard, then you can have them both timing out at the same time. The more focus regen you have during Bestial Wrath, the more you can just unleash your damage and the more your pet can get higher damage attacks. Frenzy and Focus Fire are a very important part of Beast Mastery. You have a 40% chance to gain a Frenzy stack every time your pet basic attacks. What this Frenzy stack is increasing your pet's attack speed, but the most important part is that what that means is you can cast Focus Fire and you will gain 6% attack speed or haste per stack that you spend, but also gain 8% attack power because of the empowered focus fire per stack that you spend. So this makes it an extremely important spell, especially when comboing with other abilities. Generally, you want to just make sure you don't let it expire. So if you see the timer ticking down on the stacks, just cast it. If possible, save up stacks as much as you can. The only times you don't do this is if you're about to go into Bestial Wrath, you want to use whatever focus fire stacks you have, or if you have Stampede up, you want to use whatever focus fire stacks you have. The only time you pretty much will not worry about casting focus fire with a spell is when Stampede's on cooldown, obviously, and as well as Bestial Wrath, but if Bestial Wrath is below 20 seconds left on its cooldown, then usually you will try to save the stacks and then use them at 10 seconds for the cooldown, because that way, focus fire being a 20-second effect, the 10 seconds that it's still getting off cooldown, you have that extra damage, and then just be ready to go right into Bestial Wrath as soon as it comes up, because that way you'll get the full 10 seconds of focus fire, and that's a lot of increased damage. That meaning if Bestial Wrath is above 20 seconds of a cooldown, and you have 5 focus fire stacks, and you don't have Stampede or anything coming up soon either, then basically just use your stacks and get the attack power. It's not worth saving them for 30 or 40 seconds or anything like that just to combo it. It's better just to use them and then get whatever stacks you can to use with the Bestial Wrath when it comes up. An important thing is that you want to be able to pay attention to these buffs, both your Frenzy and Focus Fire and your Steady Focus buff. You want to make sure you're paying attention and maintaining those and using them as best as you can. Weak auras are a very good and helpful tool for doing this. You can make these kind of weak auras very easily. I'll put a paste bin in the description that will link you to what weak aura I use for these. Another important one is a focus fire weak aura, which was made by the hunter Azortharion, which is this thing bouncing right here. Pretty much any hunter I know uses this weak aura. It is extremely helpful. It will ultimately tell you when you can and can't or should cast focus fire. This is generally always right. The only times that you wouldn't follow it is if it's a certain fight where you're trying to save your focus fire for a specific point in the fight, saving a cooldown, having to kill a priority target, whatever it is. Bestial Wrath is a big and important spell to talk about for Beast Mastery Hunter. This will be what you can cast every 1 minute that increases your and your pet's damage, and it increases your damage by a significant amount, especially for your pet, which is the majority of your damage. When in Blackrock Foundry gear, using the 2-piece bonus, your kill command has a chance to reset the Bestial Wrath, and an important thing to note about this is that if you use Bestial Wrath and then use kill command and you reset your Bestial Wrath, you do not want to just recast it again, as that will just waste a lot of Bestial Wrath and a lot of damage that you could have potentially had. What you want to do is if you Bestial Wrath, then kill command and get a reset, just continue with your normal Bestial Wrath rotation, just dumping your focus and using as much damage as you can get out. And then when you're nearing the end of that Bestial Wrath, you can start using Cobra Shot and then reset your steady focus and make sure you're at an adequate focus level to go into your next Bestial Wrath. So you can chain them together, and that way you get a lot of effectiveness. And as I said earlier, when you're about to go into Bestial Wrath, you want to use whatever focus fire stacks you have, whether it's 1, whether it's 3, whether it's 5. Use what you have. Trinkets are a very important thing that you can combo with Bestial Wrath. The one trinket that you can do this with is Beating Heart of the Mountain, or if you were using the lucky double-sided coin from the beginning of the expansion, that's another one that you can combo with it. Sometimes it can be hard to judge because Bestial Wrath is not always going to be the 1 minute cooldown. So if you get a proc, you might reset it, and then it could be completely off that 1 minute cycle where it won't always line up with the Beating Heart. The important thing to think of though is that you always want to combo the trinket with something. So even if it's not Bestial Wrath, combo with 5 stacks of Frenzy, combo with Stampede, like just save it to use it with something. Don't just use it on its own. You will get more benefit out of comboing it just from waiting for a moment. What a lot of people might not realize is that Master's Call can sometimes be a very beneficial spell in raiding, especially for a Beast Mastery Hunter, where if my pet's out of range to kill command, which works like a charge, I can't use kill command until it's in its range of 25 yards. But if I'm in between the target and my pet, I could use Master's Call to bring it to myself and then charge it to the target, like so. It's a very good method of slingshotting your pet across a room into a target that you want it to be attacking. This is really good for certain fights where a boss might move around a lot, or you might be switching targets to certain things. All the hunter pets and warlords of Draenor have pretty much been normalized, where there's no pet that stands out above the others. The only thing is that a lot of people tend to use Spirit Beasts at this point because they have their ability Spirit Mend, which the tooltip does not really demonstrate very well how much healing it actually does. It doesn't do an immense amount, but it does more than it shows. This can be helpful for certain things, like if you don't have your potion, or if you just don't want to use your potion yet. It's just a little extra healing on a 30-second cooldown. There's really no reason not to use it. If your raid is missing a buff, maybe, if you want to use a different pet for that, which in most cases that won't be needed. Buffs are all over the place at this point. Racials are pretty much similar to trinkets, where you will usually want to try and combo them with something. You could even combo a trinket and a racial depending on what it is. If you are a troll or an orc, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Generally though, you will want to try and combo with your Bestial Wrath or a Stampede or 5 stacks if you really need to, because Bestial Wrath maybe is on too long of a cooldown. As for Blood Elf with Arcane Torrent, usually you'll want to do this after your opener, and then anytime it's up pretty much, because you're just getting more use out of it if you're always casting it when it's off of cooldown. The only time you wouldn't do this if you really think you need it for a silence at some point, which you more than likely shouldn't, so there's no reason to save it. With Troll and Orc racials or other DPS increase racials, then usually use them in the opener with your abilities, and then you will try to combo it anytime after with your abilities. First I'm going to try to show the opener using steady focus, and at around 2 seconds of the pull timer you want to use pre-pot and start casting a Cobra shot. At around 1 you'll use pet attack, depending on how far you are from the boss. If you're really far you can do this at 2 as well. After that Cobra shot ends, you'll start casting the next Cobra shot. At this point the fight will probably have started. Then you'll use Stampede and your racials or trinkets. Then you'll use Bestial Wrath, then Kill Command, then Barrage, and then you'll just proceed into your normal priority. Here I will show it using a pull timer.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And as you'll see, I got some sacks here, and this is going crazy. You will want to cast whatever focus fire you have in that opener, because while you have Stampede up, as I said, you just want to use whatever focus fire stacks you have, as well as if you're in the early Bestial Wrath. The only time it becomes not worth it is if Bestial Wrath is almost over already. Then it's not worth using the global during your Bestial Wrath to cast focus fire stacks, because you're not going to use them as much. I will usually use misdirect at around 3 seconds, but as I do not have anything to misdirect, I could set it to my pet, but if it's not a raid, I'm not going to bother right now. But I would generally misdirect around 3 seconds in the opener, especially if I'm using steady focus. If you're using Dire Beast, you could do it earlier, or later rather. Next I'm just going to show the opener if you are using Dire Beast. This one's a little shorter because you don't have to cast any Cobra shots this time. Here you'll pretty much just pre-pot at least 1 second before the pull. Obviously just get the pre-pot off. It doesn't matter where you put it. You can put it at 5 seconds, 3 seconds, 1 second, whatever you want. I know some people don't want to risk waiting and then it get pulled and then you can't get the pre-pot at all. but I usually tend to wait until 1 second, but it does get ruined by my guild a lot, so if that's something you run into a lot, then you might want to think about pre-potting earlier. Once the fight starts, you can use Stampede and then use your racials or trinkets, then Dire Beast, Bestial Wrath, Kill Command, Barrage, and then you will proceed to the priority as normal. So, gonna do a pull 10 again, and then can show it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And again, it's just whatever stacks you get, just use them right away. If you don't get any, then that's just unlucky, but that's pretty much what BM is actually. It's a lot of RNG right now. You're very dependent on getting a Bestial Wrath proc or getting Frenzy stacks. That's pretty much all I have to talk about. If you think there's anything else that needs explaining, or if you want anything else explained, please do leave a comment. I will take any suggestion. If you want me to make another video, I can try. If you want any kind of weak order video, I can also do that. I will put the weak auras that I'm using in the description of this video, and I hope they are helpful, and I hope this video has been helpful.